Our friend Father Dave Nix does a 180 flip-flop on divorce. Matthew 19 has an exception clause for separation, okay? Can you do that for adultery, or do you do that because the marriage is invalid? What's the answer? Well, 2 years ago, Father Dave Nix correctly pointed out, in union with the church fathers, saints, popes, Cornelius a Lapide, that the exception clause in Matthew 19 is for adultery. Therefore, you can separate but never divorce. You can only separate for adultery. Now, in January, he is saying the exception clause is for invalidity. You can't have it both ways, and only one is correct. However, with our current separation process, therefore, it doesn't exist. It's just no fault. There can be no marriage contract. That's why after the Beatles, they changed the interpretation of Matthew 19. So we're going to get to the bottom of this, but I had to reshoot this intro. This is a brand new intro. I already made the video 2 days ago, but I forgot, or I noticed that in the beginning of the video of Father Nix, he openly admits what I'm saying, and then 2 years later in his new article, he pretends he never said what we're about to hear right now. Let's listen. Take it away, Father Nix.
So we have this important line from Matthew 19 that affects millions of American Catholics today. And I say to you, whoever divorces his wife except for sexual immorality and marries another commits adultery. Or in the Douay Rhymes, we heard in Matthew 19:9, and I say to you that whosoever shall put away his wife, except it be for fornication, and shall marry another, committeth adultery, and he that shall marry her that is put away committeth adultery. Now, all through seminary, I tried to apply that exception of adultery to declarations of nullity, which are usually given for lack of discretion before getting married.
Right. So he all through seminary, he tried to apply that separation clause or that exception clause to because the marriage is invalid, because that's what everyone says, because that's what everyone's told, because separation isn't a sin, only divorce without annulment is, right? That's what we're told now. This is why this of the new interpretation.
But it turns out the church fathers, they weren't actually talking about annulments because Christ wasn't talking about annulments.
So this is where I'm saying he openly admits, and he gets it right. The church fathers were not talking about annulments in Matthew 19:9. Like everyone says today, they are. No, because Christ was not talking about annulments in Matthew 19:9. So he gets this right, and for some reason, he changed from the time of this video 2 years ago.
Now, I'm not saying there's no valid declarations of nullity today. I'm just saying the church fathers and the popes and the saints, conglomerated by Father Lapide, as we're going to see, have absolutely no reference to annulments with this line.
So, like he just admits it again, no reference to annulments, meaning Matthew 19:9 doesn't pertain to validity in the slightest. That's not what it's about. There is no annulment in the Bible. It's only separation, okay? Which means there's a marriage contract. Sorry, let's keep going.
And I say to you, whoever divorces his wife, except for sexual immorality, and marries another, commits adultery. That exception. Or what we heard in the Douay Rhymes Bible. And I say to you that whosoever shall put away his wife, except it be for fornication, and shall marry another, committeth adultery. And he that shall marry her that is put away committeth adultery. What we're going to see is that Christ meant anytime you remarry, it's adultery. You can leave your spouse if that spouse was unfaithful. We're going to see really why you probably shouldn't.
You can leave your spouse if that spouse was unfaithful, but you can't leave your spouse on suspicion of invalidity. That's also what church teaches, which I'll get to later in the video.
But you're still not allowed to get remarried in that one tiny exception. Isn't that amazing? I had no idea about this until reading the church fathers today, because I had been trying to pigeonhole Matthew 19 into the canon law section of my brain on annulments.
As does everybody. They're thinking the exception, like I said, since marriage isn't a contract, it's a covenant of love. Therefore, if you need to separate, there's no problem separating. In other words, separation is up to you. This is only a governance of nullity. Matthew 19. No.
So immorality or fornication, those are the two translations, but the word in Greek is porneia. Very interesting that the word in Greek is porneia, but that just includes all sexual immorality.
Porneia is an umbrella term for everything that violates marriage, anything that's against marriage. So you can put away your spouse for porneia, aka adultery. Anything that they don't that's makes it unlivable, but it has nothing to do with validity. There is no biblical basis for annulment. Our friend Father Dave Nix has just written an article explaining that there is, and that exception in for the exception clause in Matthew 19 is consanguinity. So if you marry your cousin, it's not valid, and that's where he gets this from. He's wrong historically and logically. We're going to go through this, and by the end of the video, we're all going to be Catholic on what the exception clause in Matthew 19 is and how this annulment revolution needs Father Dave Nix's interpretation. I'm John Farrell. This is Annulment Proof.
Frowned upon. I got to admit, I'm not immune to that. I mean, my first relationship was not good. First date, first kiss, first taste of loving. You were my first cousin.
Guess it's not a laughing matter, that's for sure. We're going to try to track this noise down. Hold on, Mr. Paisley. Back off. All right. Thank you, my man. That's super fun. Hey, so listen, I like Father Dave Nix. That's why I say in my background, he is right about a lot of stuff, and I've learned a lot from him. In fact, one of the key things was he explained that per Cornelius a Lapide and Matthew 19, this is like a couple years ago, I never even knew this. Everyone thought annulments were in the Bible, and that's what he always used to say, and that's what he believed, and then he said, well, wait a minute, it's actually, the exception clause is adultery, and now he's backtracking on that. I think he's a little confused, I'm not sure, so we're going to try to iron this out, and let's start with his article that he made. And we'll go through it, and then we will hopefully reach some conclusions here. At least I've got the conclusion, but hold on. Let's see what we got. Let's turn this on. All right, so this is his new article right here. Let's just start with this. Hang on. His quote. Okay, this is from Twitter, of course. I'm blocked on Facebook and Twitter. Sorry, I'd like to talk to the guy. It's been years he won't talk to me. The word in Matthew 19, porneia, is currently used to justify annulments. The problem is that it was translated by all the church fathers to mean incest. That's wrong, and I'm going to prove that to you in a little bit. The fathers all said it meant adultery. This was the only excuse to leave a spouse. No, because obviously that makes no sense. Because if he's saying porneia, yes, short of consanguinity, marrying a family member, annulments are invalid. So he's saying that if like Brad Paisley's saying, if you marry your cousin, that's an invalid marriage, and that's what porneia means. It logically makes no sense, because then you can't separate before the annulment. Okay, so you got the cart before the horse. There's that. Okay, so let's keep going here. Just a second. Okay, so I shrunk the screen a little bit. I'm going to have everything in the show notes there, everything, so you can see it all. This is his January 7th, 2025 article that really, a lot of people looked at it, and that's why we're talking about it. Okay. Is there a scriptural basis for annulment? And like I said, the answer is no way. It's not in the Bible. It doesn't mean annulments can't exist, but there's no scripture for it. It's only that it's the exception clause for separating. And let's go. So anyway, he said he gives the Latin here. It means this word, whatever that word is, means to let go or put away, not divorce. Okay. So he goes through I'm just going to read through his article real quick and just go to the parts that I want to talk about. Civil marriage, natural marriage, sacramental marriage. They're all the same thing, except one has grace. That's it. But he says something here that to me it just makes me think, what's going on with this with Father Nix? Why does he say this? Sacramental marriage. This is when a baptized man marries a baptized woman. So far, so good. Before Vatican II, this only included Catholics. That's just a crazy thing to say. No, because anyone who's baptized is sacramentally married. If even like two Lutherans get married at the beach, it's a sacrament because they're baptized. Vatican II didn't. You can't change that. I don't know why he's saying that. Like I said, something's not quite right with how he's thinking. He just kind of departs from reality on some stuff. So let's keep going. Okay. Like I said, we're going to get to the juicy part here. Okay, 3 levels of marriage, blah, blah, blah. Okay. An annulment is when a bishop, through his diocesan tribunal, says that while 2 baptized Catholics got naturally married, God himself purposely refrained from galvanizing that natural marriage into a sacramental marriage the day of the wedding. That's weird. That doesn't make any sense. Because when 2 baptized Catholics got naturally married, okay, 2 baptized Catholics can never get naturally married. That doesn't exist. When you're baptized, it's sacramental or it doesn't exist. So he's saying they get naturally married and God refrained from galvanizing that natural marriage. In other words, making it a sacrament? No, that's not true. So this is part of why people like to talk about, well, my marriage might have been natural, but it wasn't sacramental because it didn't feel like John Paul II said it needs to. And all right. Okay, so we'll go back. We'll go down to another section here. It says, this is why all those remarried Catholics out there frequently say, I was never divorced. I got an annulment, meaning that the diocese told me I never had a valid marriage. This is a way of putting the cart before the horse, as one way of doing it, meaning I can just get a divorce and then go get the annulment, and then the divorce goes away because I was never married. That's wrong. There's probably analogies like that, like shoot first, ask questions later kind of thing. You can't do that. While I'm thinking of it, let's scroll up. Let me see if I can find it up here. Okay. This is from the Acta Apostolic, how do you say that? The AAS, when it's official for the church. This is pretty cool. When there is a question of alleged nullity of marriage, like if you think your marriage isn't valid, private authority is not recognized as an adequate basis for establishing a legitimate separation, a putting away. So you don't get to put away your spouse on your own authority. Even if you think your marriage isn't valid, this is why the whole exception clause for Matthew 19:9 makes no sense if you say it means invalid for any reason. If you say that, it's just the whole thing falls apart. And so Father Nix is he's enabling these annulments by what he's saying. Now check this out. Even the temporary interruption as well as the perpetual cessation of the conjugal life by way of a separation of parties, though not affecting the bond of marriage, can in no way be specifically considered a merely civil effect over which the state has any authority. That's pretty cool. That's what I've been saying all along. So child support, alimony, who gets the house, who gets the dog, who gets the kids, none of that the state is allowed to touch. Let's continue. The church may authorize the civil power to grant a sentence of temporal or perpetual separation. Hear that? The church can authorize, but not the state. But it suffices to note here that the civil power, the divorce courts, if acting without ecclesiastical approval, bishop's permission to divorce, may not legitimately sanction a separation of baptized persons. So if all this exception clause is for consanguinity or my marriage was invalid, therefore the Bible says I can separate. That's what Father Alar is saying. All these people are talking this way. And it's really bad because it's making it so there's no marriage contract, there's no rights. You just separate if you think it's invalid because our Lord Jesus Christ said so in Matthew and in other places too. No. It doesn't make any sense, and it contradicts what has been said throughout history until the Beatles, and also right here in the AAS. Okay, hang on. The matter of granting a separation between baptized persons belongs primarily to the church. Primarily means first, right? Right. To the church, as interpreting the divine law. Wow, did you hear that? Divine law? What divine law? What divine law are we talking about? Hang on. Okay, so separation between baptized persons belongs primarily to the church as interpreting the divine law or as giving effect to her canonical prescriptions. All right, so the divine law they're talking about is the exception clause, where it says you can put away your spouse, not divorce. You can put away your spouse for porneia, for fornication, aka adultery. All right, and then if you do that, then the canon law naturally says you have to bring your case within 6 months to the bishop so he can make it public, because if you get married in public, you have to get separated in public. It's not a private matter. All this stuff completely overthrows what Father Nix is saying. He's basically just giving a more conservative version of what the crazies and the tribunal are doing. All right, here we go. Is there a scriptural basis for annulment? This is his article. We already got there. Sorry. Okay. Blah, blah, blah. Okay, let's cruise down here. The stuff in yellow is what I highlighted that I think he didn't say correctly, and I want to comment on it. Blah. Okay, here we go. Okay, so and the stuff that I wrote in pink is what I thought he said right that was good. All right. Maybe I'll try to make it bigger here just for a minute. Most annulments come under lack of due discretion or defect of consent. But this is interpreted in a manner so broad that a woman could claim retroactively upon her engagement that she didn't know her future husband was going to spend so much time working on his car in the garage. Or maybe a man might claim on the intake paperwork that he did not know his future wife was going to be on Instagram so much. These are only slight exaggerations, but if you saw the reasons people gave today on their annulment forms, you can prove defect of consent for any circus of silly reasons. You can be well on your way to committing adultery with your bishop's approval, but only if you pay him some money to ratify your conscience, of course. Yeah, that whole money thing is kind of debunked because they're not making any money on annulments. It costs them way more to do it, and they just want to make it free and stuff like that. Anyway, let's see. Anyway, so yeah, any reason you can use any reason to annul, because if like I always say, if marriage is love, then you can't define it. I'm going to make this part big. So, and the reason why I say this, the canon lawyers even admit this in their Bible, which is basically the new commentary of canon law. They'll say on page 1357 of that commentary, it is impossible to make a complete listing of the rights and obligations that the spouses have toward one another into the marriage. They cannot tell you what your rights are because they cannot define the object of consent. It used to be procreation, right over the body. Those are legally definable. But now it's the right over the self for a communion of life and love. So therefore, if you find that you're spending too much time on Instagram or working on the car too much, that you're not capable of life and love, or partnership. So therefore, this happens. So Father Nix is let's continue and see what he says. Okay, I like to see myself a little bit so I can. Okay, all right. Yeah. Okay. He says even though you get the annulment, it destroys the lives of so many children. Correct. Your confused children will not be healed when a tribunal happens to label your. Okay, yeah, that's right. There ain't no healing for the kids but if it's not about the kids anymore, because it's about your relationship. Because children the procreation is not primary; they're secondary. Therefore, that's why we have homo marriage, and the kids don't really matter in these annulments. They don't care about that anymore. This is why you need to do the separation first, just like I said earlier. That's in the AAS. All right, let's keep going. Now then, here's something I wrote. I wrote here, the annulment explosion was caused by one thing. NFP requiring procreation, objective, finite, to be secondary to love. That's right. Once you legalize NFP, your object of consent is not just the body for procreation, it's the self for love, which is infinite and undefinable. Therefore, anyone who can't produce the self for love in a total way or something like that cannot consent to marriage. That's why anyone who's experiencing any bit of negativity in their married life can say you're not capable. Now then, it says now we get to the scripture on all this. Exactly, this is the key part. Okay, he quotes Latin. Okay, the ESV reads, what is that called? The something standard version? I forgot. But anyway, it's one of the main Bibles that everyone reads. English Standard Version, I guess. And I say to you, whoever divorces his wife except for sexual immorality and marries another commits adultery. That's the Protestant definition. That's what the New American Bible says. They all say this: whoever divorces his wife. And everyone's like, oh, I guess you can do except for sexual. You can divorce. There's an excuse for divorce. And of course, the Protestants will say, yes, when they commit adultery, boom. The covenant is broken. You broke the covenant. Now we can do divorce. Douay Rheims, baby. You've got to go to the Douay Rheims. Got to. There's so much crazy out there. The Douay Rheims locked down the Vulgate, and it is what it is. Okay? It's politically incorrect. The Douay Rheims says, I say to you, whoever shall put away. Now, put away means separate, right? So if that's what's going on. Put away and divorce are two different terms that mean two different things. If you put away your spouse, and at least he writes this in here, if you put away your wife, except it be for fornication, and shall marry another, committeth adultery. He that marrieth her is put it. Okay. So the Pharisees are going to Jesus and they're asking him two questions, who can put away, what happens if you put away, who gets to put away their spouse, and when is adultery? So it's two questions. So he answers with two answers. If you put away your spouse, that's adultery, and that an innocent one. And then if you marry somebody that's already been put away, that's also adultery. Now then, he says, this is kind of important. It's very important, actually. This is what Father Nix says. It is almost certain that the phrase refers to incest. Oh, this is the commentary from the English Standard Version. They don't know what. By the way, Catholics know how to interpret the Bible. Catholics have one unchanging interpretation. That's how you know you have the right interpretation of the Bible, is if it's the one that's always been there and never changes. Okay, all this stuff, all these new interpretations, all these we don't know, it's all new. That's because once you change the definition of marriage, you got to change everything connected to it, like tons of stuff. Canon 915, all sorts of stuff. So these guys are saying the Navarre Bible, the commentary from the Navarre Bible is saying it's almost certain that the phrase refers to incest. But we don't really know, but we think it does. Okay. And now that Navarre Bible commentary was written in the 70s, between 1972 and 75, or 2005. So that's modernist stuff, and they're saying, we think it means this. And everyone's like, heck yeah, because as long as it means invalidity, I'm cool, right? Because if if I think my marriage is invalid, then I can separate because there's no contract, because there's nothing wrong with separating, apparently, as long as you think your marriage is invalid. So, Father, let's continue, because I don't want to get ahead of myself. There's a lot to talk about. Okay, so he says, so look at that. The only scriptural basis for annulment is consanguinity. Okay, Father Nix, you just said, like in a dogmatic way, the only scriptural basis for annulment is consanguinity, because these modernists in the Navarre Bible commentary recently, while between listening to who is it? Who's Goodbye Yellow Brick Road? Who's that guy? Not John Denver. Whatever. The guy who's on the Muppets a lot. kind of homo, that guy. Why am I blanking? I'm going to come back to him. You know what I'm talking about. So they're listening to that guy, and they say that the only scriptural basis. So Father Nix is saying the only scriptural basis for annulment is consanguinity, and I'm saying no. That's there is no scriptural basis for annulment, and it doesn't mean consanguinity. I'm going to give you his own words in another video that refutes what he just said. Okay. So he's saying, if any reader could, okay, so he's saying before our current crisis of faith, so the reason there's tons of annulments, I guess, is because we have a current crisis of faith. Thousands of annulments for dozens of reasons. All right, so I say, whoever shall put away his wife except it be for fornication. That's what the Douay Rheims says, all right? That's what we got to go to. It says it right there. Whoever shall put away his wife, we'll make it a little bit bigger here on this. Whoever shall put away his wife except for fornication. What does that mean? Does that mean you can never put away your wife unless it's your cousin? That's what Father Nix says it means. No, because as I said earlier, you can't be putting people away, separating from them, unless you know your marriage is, unless you know they're not your spouse, and you have to go to the bishop first. It's not the, so this is, we're going to talk about what fornication means, what it always has been, what the church always says it means. The church does know how to interpret the Bible. It's not up to us to figure it out, okay? What does "except it be for fornication" mean? Let's see what the Douay Rheims commentary says, which he left out of his article. He did not include it. Why, I don't know, but I guess it's because it refutes his point. Except it be for, in the case of fornication, that is adultery. Hello, Father Nix. The wife may be put away. That is of adultery, okay? But even then, the husband cannot marry as long as the wife is living. So if you're married to your cousin, oh, it's so stupid. They don't call it your wife, and you have to stay. Marriage is till death in all cases, but separation can exist if they commit adultery. That's what the church has always said. And that's what all the saints say, the fathers. It's always been interpreted that way until the annulment revolution, and we have to get rid of the contract. So we have to find a wrinkle somewhere. And this is the contract. You can't separate except for fornication. That's the contract, because it's in law that you have to right to live together because procreation is primary. But when all that's out the window, all this goes out the window too, and we have to backfill with these new interpretations and talk about, do the, what do you call it? Do the beard stroking and talk about what porneia really means. And let's look at, oh, brother, that's what Protestants do. They're like, let's read this in context and really go back to the Greek and find out what it means. It's kind of obvious if you just read the words and then go with what everyone in the church has always said. Something like this, however, doesn't work for lack of due to, okay. Hang on a second. Again, okay. Something like this is Father Nix. He is saying, keep in mind that would grant, but I would only consider obvious examples like the fiancé was, okay. Something like this, however, doesn't work for lack of due discretion. I didn't know she was going to be so bad at parallel parking. Yeah, okay, so he's saying that's a silly reason for an annulment, and I would agree. Okay, and he says, again, only a slight exaggeration if you saw the ridiculous reasons granted for tens of thousands of annulments today. Yeah, okay, so Father Nix, this is the question, one of several questions I've been trying to ask you for years, if you wouldn't block me all the time. Due discretion for what exactly? What do you have to be able to know in order to consent to marriage? What do you have to know in order to consent to buying a Big Mac at McDonald's? What it is? How much detail do you really have to truly know and love to get your frickin' Big Mac? Anyway, due discretion for where babies come from is the answer. But now, because marriage is a love compact and you have to have love, you have to have due discretion for how to navigate, what giving yourself truly means. And no one can do that because no one can legally define it. He says here, this is good what he says, 99.6% of ordinary applications in the USA were granted for defective consent, meaning like 1095, Canon 1095, which can mean if you had butterflies in your stomach on the day of your wedding and now you deserve a new spouse. So he is saying that, whoa, we can't have just tons of abortions, but maybe just a tiny bit of abortions. That's effectively what he's saying by using this analogy, or by saying that we can't have annulments for any crazy reason, like he blows his nose too loud, so he's not capable of a partnership of life and love, but only for consanguinity, if he's, you married someone in your family, your cousin. And that's kind of an attractive thing, I guess, but it's not, like I said, it defies logic and history. We'll keep going. All right. Let's see. However, if they had children, I would try to talk them into convalidation, not an annulment. That's also good what he said. That's right. Because the church, like Lila Miller, she's right about that, always says per Leo the 13th, we need to pursue reconciliation with everybody and never give up on reconciling them. So if you have kids, P.S., if you have kids, you have discretion, you have capacity, and yes, convalidation if you were married outside the church or something. That would be best. As far as the ordinary process, in the 1970s, the big corrupt business began of tribunals charging hundreds of dollars. We already talked about that. It's not a money thing. The only way the money works is they want to try to keep everybody happy. They're not like making big bucks on annulments. They're losing money on it, but they're like, hey, a big group of people is going to leave because we're not giving them the annulment because they all got married weird, or they're shacking up, so we need a Catholic fix for that, and that's all this is. The state said no fault divorce, so the American Catholics responded about 10 seconds later and said, we'll bend the rules on the annulments and we'll change what marriage is so that we can give you your Catholic annulment, aka divorce. Lack of due discretion. This is such a crock of tampering with the sacraments, which is essentially making a mockery of Christ himself. Yes, but like I say, what due discretion for what, Father Nix? What do you have to have discretion for to get married? He cannot answer that question because the only answer is to make a baby, to know where babies come from. That's all you need discretion for. That's it. Okay? But that's the status quo doesn't allow that. Your name is mud if you say that. Now, this is some stuff he says wrong. I am not saying that all annulments are invalid, but most of them are. That he's right about that. Like I said, if you had kids, it's valid. If that's in a nutshell, in a rule of thumb. If you had kids, it's valid. That's it. If at any point you become convinced your annulment was most likely invalid. Oh, this is crazy. Check this out. I'm going to make it bigger. Hold on. If at any point you become convinced your annulment was most likely invalid, you need to live a life of continence. No sexual contact. This isn't my idea, blah, blah, blah. This is from God. He is clear. Your salvation depends on it. Super duper wrong. No. When you're, let's say there's a bunch of people out there who got the McNulment. Now they're remarried and they're kind of like, whoa, I'm not sure. I think I was really married to the first person. I think my annulment was fakey. I'm kind of figuring it out now. What do I do? And he's saying you need to live a life of continence. Therefore, Whoops. Let me fix that. No sexual contact. However, marriage is public, and Father Nix, I don't think understands this. You have public rights. So if you're married to somebody new, they have the public right to your body. And you don't get to say, whoa, in my conscience, I'm not feeling, no. You have to live the conjugal life with your new spouse because it's public. They have the public right. You can, in your conscience, know they're not your spouse, but publicly, there it is. If you can, this is a good question. What do you do if you're in a new marriage and you kind of wake up one day and say, my annulment was fake, and this is not my real spouse. What do? You need to live your state in life, which is you're married to this new person, so you have to live with them and do everything that married people do with them. But you also can pursue to get rid of the annulment and reestablish conjugal life with your original spouse. And the way you do that is you go to the bishop and you say, my conscience says this, I can't live with my spouse for this reason, and see if you can get the bishop to give you permission to separate, and because he's the only one who can govern these separations per divine law, and that divine law is the Matthew 19:9 exception clause for porneia. So for fornication. So / adultery. Adultery is anything that's against marriage, basically, which he says later. So back to answering my question, you can ask the bishop for permission to separate, then you go and reopen the annulment case and say, I lied on the annulment, this is wrong, I did know my marriage is valid, I did have capacity, I knew this, blah, blah, blah. So if you know your marriage was, your annulment's wrong, request a separation from the bishop per your conscience. Hopefully your spouse will go along with it, whatever, and see what he does, and then try to reverse the annulment, which you can do. But if the bishop says no and your spouse says, no, we're married, and that's it, then how's it go? What you have bound on loose shall be bound in heaven. So that's it. You don't get to live a life of continence. Like I said, I don't know if Father Nix understands that marriage is a contract of objective rights. And I think he's saying that because he was trained or taught that marriage is love and therefore unlimited rights. As we discussed, admitted in the 2000 commentary, unlimited rights. No, it's from here to the moon and back. I love you to the moon and back. Remember that line? Anyway, let's keep going. The current annulment system has no precedent in Catholic Church history before 1970. That's correct. It certainly has no scriptural precedent. Yeah, that's right. There's no annulments in Scripture. That's right. Okay. When Jesus said you couldn't leave your wife except for reasons of porneia, aka he did not mean adultery. So that is Father Nix's dogmatic statement right there. When Jesus Christ said you couldn't leave your wife, he did not mean adultery. Sorry, totally wrong, as we talked about. And it, like I said, it makes no logical sense because no one can leave unless they can prove there's no marriage. And you have to, therefore, all annulments must be first, and which is the way it's supposed to be. But anyway, then that what it does is that if the exception clause is for invalidity, then that means there is no exception clause for abuse, adultery, any of that stuff, which can't exist. Because that must be by divine law. Divine law means it comes from Scripture or infallibility somewhere else. The Church Fathers, all the way up to the Navarre Bible run by Opus Dei, Whoopie-Doo, a group I hardly can... hold that porneia means consanguinity. Yeah, that's just the easy way of... Okay, like I said, we want to have abortion safe, legal, and rare. We want to have annulment safe, legal, and rare. It's like that. I shouldn't say that. We want to have divorce safe, legal, and rare. These guys are just saying we're really conservative on annulment, but we're still going to blow up Scripture and say that porneia means consanguinity. It's wrong. I said it's a modernist invention. None of this existed before the Beatles. None of it. In fact, the famous Protestant John Piper shows that Christ himself did not hold that adultery was a good enough reason to leave one's spouse. Holy cow. I don't care because he's Protestant. All Protestants say this kind of stuff anyway because they have no church to govern separation. That's how the fault-based divorce started with the Catholic Church because we have justice because of the marriage contract. All that's out the window because we have love-based stuff now, like I said. I think Father Nix is a little sensitive or a little bit partial to the, not like believe all women, but, for damsel in distress, she can kind of do her own thing and, it's cool. I get the feeling he's a little bit like that, which is why he doesn't want to go there. Okay, so this part I thought was good. This is why I can say with confidence that the tribunals and the bishops who rubber stamp all these declarations of nullity are in danger of going to hell for destroying so many families. We are really only talking about Catholic divorces diabolically sanitized into the term annulment. These tribunals and their bishops are worse than Protestants, as proved in the previous paragraph. Yeah, he's right, and that's why I said right here, Father Nix is right. I put this on Facebook a long time ago. Justifying pain. Yeah, this is totally right. So he does say a lot of good stuff, of course. That's why a lot of people like him and everything. I like him, but he's got this part wrong, and it's goofing everything up. And the part of I asked him on Twitter recently, even though he blocked me, I have different accounts, and he just won't answer. Okay, so, because he can't, there's no answer to it. And bishops, don't tell me if we don't give out all these annulments, people will leave the church. The truth is, it's better for the lady to have a temper tantrum at your fatherhood saying no to something than leave the church, repent, and then return to true teachings of the Catholic Church than it is for uncatechized laity to be coddled and pacified in their modernist parish on their merry way to hell. That's exactly right. I wrote here, annulments create Catholic zombies. It's because they have to have the new definition of marriage because once you get annulled, you're baked in your brain. It's like, wow, I can't really go back now. I've gone through the portal. You know what I mean? I've like some of those science fiction movies, you go into go through the portal and now you can't come back. That's what happens when you get the annulment. It's really hard because you got everything working against you to go back to reality, and it just messes you up. And then you don't want truth at all costs because the cost is so high. And people go there because they are directed into it by everybody who's trying to, quote, help them. And Father Dave Nix here is not helping us by saying that the exception clause is for invalidity. It doesn't matter what the cause is. When you say it's for invalidity, you say it's not for separation, which means there's no biblical basis for separation of spouses, which means it's not per divine law, and that means you have to throw out all marriage rights in order to separate while the bond is remaining, and that's what they do today. Divorce is not a sin. There's no rights. Hang on, let's see what else we got. Okay, he says this. But the bishops aren't going to listen to me, so I write the list to the lady. Choose wisely if you're going to listen to Jesus Christ and the church fathers or your local modernist tribunal on letting you get remarried. Okay, the church fathers never said the exception clause was sanguinity. Consanguinity. While I've got that on my mind, let's go up to what the church fathers said about what the exception clause means to refute Father Dave Nix's stance, okay? This is St. Augustine right here. Therefore, in order to confirm the fact that the wife is not to be put away, the wife, okay? Here, I'm going to make myself small so I can kind of see myself at least a little bit. How do I do that? Like this? Okay. Okay, therefore, in order to confirm the fact that the wife is not to be put away without grave reason, so you can't put your wife away, okay? But if she's not your wife because of consanguinity, you don't say that, all right? And putting away is not divorcing. You don't put away your your invalid spouse, your invalid non-spouse. You don't put them away. You divorce them because they're not your spouse, okay? This is all about dealing with who's valid. Therefore, in order to confirm the fact that the wife is not to be put away without grave reason, like adultery, okay? And you don't put her away for grave reason of, oh, it's my cousin, grave reason. No, that's okay. The Lord made no other exception. The Lord made no other exception than the case of fornication. And he commands that all the other annoyances, if perchance they arise, be steadfastly borne for the sake of conjugal fidelity and chastity. Moreover, he applies the name of adulterer to a man who marries a woman who has been loosed from her husband. Okay, loosed from your husband, that means put away. So if Matthew 19:9 exception means consanguinity, means they're not married to me, then how can someone who hangs out with my cousin who was never my spouse in the first place commit adultery with her? She's not even married to me. So that makes, like I said, zero sense, no logic, okay? Moreover, the Apostle Paul shows how long this prohibition continues. And he said it is to be, he says it is to be observed as long as her husband is alive. So none of this, it is to be observed as long as her husband turns into a non-husband at the tribunal or goes and gets the annulment somewhere. Oh, brother. Annulments are like an aberration if you marry the wrong person or whatever impediment. They're not in the Bible necessarily, and the church gets to make those impediments. Let's go. Let's keep going. All right. The same apostle certainly upheld this law. In this case, he is not publishing his own counsel as he does in many of his admonitions. He is announcing the precept of the Lord who commands it. For he writes, St. Paul, but with reference to those who are in wedlock, not I, but the Lord commands the wife not to depart from the husband, and if she departs, to remain unmarried or to be reconciled with her husband. So for those who are in wedlock. So if you're not in wedlock, there's no reason to have any rules or governance or scripture about what to do when you're thinking you're married to your cousin. Remain unmarried to be reconciled with her husband. And let not the husband put away his wife. So you don't get to put away your wife unless they're guilty of something. And I believe that by a similar ordinance, the husband is not to marry another woman if he puts away his wife. Why not? You're saying that you can put away your whatever the word, consanguinity. You can put away your inbred cousin. Okay, then why not marry another woman? Because it's not the exception clause. Or that is to become reconciled with her, for it may happen that he has put away on account of the kind of fornication which the Lord meant when he laid down the condition. What kind of fornication did the Lord mean when he laid down the condition? Of course, if she is not allowed to marry during the lifetime of the husband whom she has departed, okay? Oh, what? The annulment was denied because she wasn't cousin enough? Oh. And he is not allowed to marry another woman during the lifetime of the wife whom he has put away. So all of this is super obvious. It has to do with if they commit adultery or doing something really, really bad, you can put them away, but you're married for life. Divorce is Old Testament because they would push their wife off a cliff to get the new model. New Testament, zero divorce, never, never, never. Every natural marriage, every sacramental marriage ends at death. Unless there's Pauline or Petrine privilege. At any rate, Husbands and wives are to be regarded as more truly happy if by mutual consent they are able to abstain from all carnal intercourse with each other, whether they do this only after they have procreated children, blah, 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 blah. Disobeyed for a precept of the Lord which forbids dismissal. Okay. They are not disobeying that precept of the Lord which forbids the dismissal of the wife. So they are saying, hey, if we want to live, if we're married, we are really married, but if we want to live as brother and sister, we have an agreement on that, that's cool. For a husband does not put away his wife if he lives with her according to the Spirit. Okay, so you have to live with your spouse. You don't have to have relations with her, him or her. You don't have to exercise your right, but you do have to live together, man. If that's because that's part of the contract, if that's what they want. But not okay, so if he lives with her according to the Spirit, but not according to the flesh. In fact, there is then the observance that which is spoken through the apostle. It remains that those who have wives be as if they had none. So sorry to pour cold water all over Christopher West and all this, like we need to reach the pinnacle of love. One needs to be independent. You need to be act as though you have no wife, or wives act as though you have no husbands. You know what I mean? It's not like you have to complete yourself with the spouse and all that other thing. You can be independent as far as emotionally and stuff in case. That's it. Since the Lord permits that a wife be put away on account... Here, Father Nix, please listen to this. Since the Lord permits that a wife be put away on account of fornication, another question arises as to how the word fornication is to be understood. This is all St. Augustine, and therefore all the other... He's not going crazy. The other fathers kind of all went... I'm sure they're all going along with it, and all the other saints and stuff. I mean, what are they going to all say? No, it means consanguinity, and St. Augustine's like, got it totally wrong? No. Okay, I could probably look up other church fathers. It's like took me a long time just to find this. Sorry, I'm talking too much. Since the Lord permits that a wife may be put away on account of fornication, another question arises as to how the word fornication is to be understood in this context. What does fornication mean, in other words? Whether it is to be taken in the sense which everybody understands it, or in the sense in which the Scriptures usually employ it. In the first case, it would be understood to denote the kind of fornication that is committed in unchaste acts. In the other case, as we have already noted, it would be understood as denoting every sinful corruption, such as idolatry or avarice, and inconsequently, every transgression of the law through sinful desire. Okay, so that's very broad. What is fornication? As far as the exception clause, it's basically when your spouse cheats on you or does something bad against marriage. Okay. Lest we make any rash statement, let us consult the apostle. He says, to those who are in wedlock, not I, but the Lord commands that a wife is not to depart from her husband, and if she departs, that she is to remain unmarried or be reconciled with her husband. Okay. Often, this tends often like a rule to be understood, namely that if a husband puts away his wife, and this is permitted on account of fornication, he is to remain without a wife or be reconciled with her. Does that sound like what the Bible means by fornication is you married your cousin? Let's see how that would work. If a husband were to put away his wife, who was really his first cousin, so he couldn't marry her, he is to remain without a wife or be reconciled with that wife that he put away, even though it's his cousin and it's an invalid marriage. Wrong. So dumb. Super, super dumb. Okay, but no one wants to... You got to have like a guy like me staying up late at night doing this because no one wants to go here. But it's real. Certainly it would not be wrong. Okay. So anyway, this is some Deuteronomy. We don't really need to read it necessarily. It has been put away. Whoever shall put away his wife accepting the cause of fornication. That's right. I'm just emphasizing that whenever you hear whoever divorces his wife except for the marriage is unlawful. That is modernist translation that you hear all the time at Novus Ordo and maybe even at other places. But what it really means is you have to go to the Douay Rheims, or you're that whoever put away his wife except for the cause of fornication. That's what it means. And now we've just learned that fornication means bad stuff, okay? Not you're married to your cousin. And if you put them away for cause of fornication, you remain married but separated for your life, or you reconcile, because there is no divorce. No divorce. That's it. So there's no scriptural basis for annulment. But it's obvious if somebody lies on their ID and you marry the wrong person. You don't have to have the Bible to say that that's wrong. We do know what the purpose of marriage is per the Bible, per divine law, and it's procreation alone. Per divine law, Tobias 8:9. Tobias and Sarah got married. They said for procreation alone. It's divine law. Can't change it. That's what it is. We're like living in La La Land today. Okay. Okay, here. This is kind of cool. All right, so speaking of divine law, there is your separation of spouses. Your separation of spouses must be per divine law. When you're married and you need to separate, there must be divine law governing the terms of the separation. Okay, you cannot just separate and make it up, or 200 years ago they thought this, but 200 years from now we thought that, so we can just do this. No. Divine law never changes. And the reason I know that, well, everyone knows that, but look at Canon 1692 about the separation of spouses. Unless law, okay, hang on. The personal separation of baptized spouses can be decided by a decree of the diocesan bishop or by the judgment of a judge. Okay, so the bishop can decree the separation of spouses. Where the ecclesiastical decision does not produce civil effects, like the USA, if it is foreseen that there will be a civil judgment not contrary to the divine law, what divine law? The bishop of the diocese in which the spouses are living can, in light of their particular circumstances, give them permission to approach the civil courts. So that goes back, it exactly dovetails to what I said earlier, up here, way up here. Where is it? Sorry. Where did I put it? The ACTA. Dude. Okay, yeah. The church may authorize the civil power to grant a sentence of temporal or separation, and but not for the civil power can't do it. If acting without ecclesiastical approval may not legitimately sanction the separation of baptized spouses. Okay, that's what the church says, and the Canon 1692 is hand in glove with that. Where did Canon 1692 go? Sorry. Oh, dude. Okay, here it is. If it is foreseen that there will be a civil judgment not contrary to divine law, the bishop can allow them to go to the civil courts. So who's going to find out if there's a civil judgment not contrary to divine law? The bishop's going to say, look, we have an innocent spouse and a guilty spouse, and we're going to say the innocent spouse retains all the rights, gets the kids, the house, the everything, and the guilty spouse does not. If we can go to civil court and get that judgment, that's per divine law. But you heard about that guy from California, I think it was, or Texas or something, and the wife divorced him, takes the little son and chemically castrates the little son because it's her right to educate her kid, right? That's not according to divine law, if you can believe that. So if they were married and if they were all baptized, they could not, it would be a sin because they couldn't go to that civil court because their civil judgment is contrary to divine law. That's why you have to have the bishop's permission to divorce. But all this is out the window, and you've got to have that exception clause changed in order to make it work. Sorry for being long-winded. We are going to go to the video finally, okay? This is going to be pretty cool. Hang on a second. So this next video is from, I think, 2 or 3 years ago, where I learned that what the exception clause really means from Father Nix. It's a great video for the most part, and let's go through it. P.S. I need some likes just to help the algorithm and stuff. So please, it doesn't cost anything. Just click like for me, and then as you know, don't be shy in the comment section. If you hear me say something wrong, or you want to sound off, or you want to take me to task, by all means, you'll hear back from me, and I won't abandon you. We'll talk as much as you want. All right, so here we go, Father Nix. Let's see what he's got to say here about Matthew 19:9. Cool?
Beginning of the natural order instituted by God. When man's nature had fallen by sin, man changed and corrupted this institution of God and introduced divorce and polygamy. So essentially, Christian marriage is Jesus, the second person of the Trinity, who invented marriage, who made man and woman, bringing all of humanity back to the garden when you don't get to divorce, when you don't get to play games, when you don't get to go to
sorry, I need to fast forward a little bit.
Annulments, because Christian marriage is supposed to be as glorious as Adam and Eve in the garden. Doesn't mean that there's not suffering. There's redemptive suffering in marriage.
22:20.
But the bond is never to be broken, just as Adam and Eve. And so Christ, who is God, is establishing marriage. And this is why it's a challenge to the listeners, is because he's not allowing Christians to have this concessionary law. That should be a real conviction of the tribunals of the United States. Anyway, Father Lapide says, Christ said this upon two occasions. One, publicly in this place to the Jews and the Pharisees, when he here promulgated his new law, by which he revoked the power of giving a bill of divorce and brought back marriage to its primeval institution and indissolubility. See what I'm saying here? Christ brings this back. He says no more giving a bill of divorce for Christians. Why? Because he's God, he brought back marriage to its primeval institution and indissolubility. That is Adam and Eve in the garden. Shortly afterwards, he repeated the words in private to his disciples in Mark 10:10, as if to say, I enact, and as the new lawgiver of the new law and reformer of the old, I ordain and bring back marriage to its original rectitude and steadfastness. And I declare that whosoever shall put away his wife and shall marry another.
Okay, so this is here we go. This is it. This is Father Lapide talking, and Father Lapide is the man. Totally, he's got it right here. Father Nix goes through this pretty quick, so we're going to pause a little bit.
Shall be accounted and shall be in fact an adulterer. So no wonder this shocked the Pharisees, who were kind of living on the loopholes of the law at the time. Good thing that hasn't happened since then. And then we hear that heretics were of the opinion that marriage was dissolved by adultery, not only in reference to the bed.
Heretics were of the opinion that marriage was dissolved by adultery. Okay. Adultery is the exception clause. He is saying that heretics were of the opinion that marriage was dissolved by adultery. Now, Father, this is 2 or 3 years ago when he had it right. Father Nix now says that if there's consanguinity, that ends the marriage, because there is no marriage. So it's kind of like a contradiction. Listen.
Quod thorum, but also in reference to the bond, quod vinculum.
So just in case you don't know, yeah, there's divorce from bed and board, there's divorce from the bond, the separation, okay? Those are two different kinds of divorce, all right?
So that under such circumstances, it was permissible to take another wife and contract another marriage. However, Augustine and the Fathers, this is just Father Lapide summarized. Augustine
and the Fathers. So as we said in the other article, that in Father Nix's first article, the church fathers all say that the exception clause in Matthew 19:9 is consanguinity, you married your cousin. That's what all the church fathers say, according to Father Nix, as of January 2025. But this video right here that we're watching from a few years ago is contradicting that. Here we go.
Teach that even if a man should only divorce a chaste and innocent wife without marrying another,
even if a man should even divorce or separate from a chaste and innocent wife,
commits adultery, both because
he commit. You know what? I'm gonna do this. Sorry, I'm gonna put this thing on playback speed. Let's just go to 75. It doesn't sound as good, but it's easier because he goes through this so dang quick. It's pretty interesting.
Father Lapide summarizing, teach that even if a man should only divorce a chaste and innocent wife without marrying another, he commits adultery.
Right there, he just said it. If somebody puts away their spouse who's innocent, they commit adultery. Period. Separation with the bond. Separation is adultery if they're innocent. This is why everyone who divorces is guilty until proven innocent. This is like so basic, so normal, but we're all in this la-la land. Okay. I should replay that. It's so good. Here we go.
Father Lapide summarizing, teach that Even if a man should only divorce a chaste and innocent wife without marrying another, he commits adultery.
Okay.
Both because, one, he breaks the law of marriage and violates the rights of his wife.
He breaks the law of marriage and violates the rights of his wife. Those rights are the procreation and education of her children, right over the body. Those are the rights. But as we found earlier in the video today, our video, the new commentary says the rights are unlimited, so they cannot be identified. So you can't, there are no rights to violate because they're infinite. There's no way to name all the rights because there's a ton of them. There's an infinite amount because so there's always a contrary right. If you say, I have a right to the body, they can say, well, I have a right to something else, which therefore you can't have your right to the body. Sorry.
Which is a sort of adultery, for adultery means a vice directly opposed to matrimony.
Adultery means a vice directly opposed to matrimony. Correct. So adultery isn't always strictly cheating. Okay? Having an affair, whatever. That's not necessarily the only definition of adultery. It's anything. Let's just see what he just said. He's quoting Father Lapide, who's quoting the fathers of the church. Let's listen again.
Both because, one, he breaks the law of marriage and violates the rights of his wife, which is a sort of adultery, for adultery means a vice directly opposed to matrimony.
Got it.
Such as putting away a guiltless wife.
Putting away a guilt. See that? Adultery is putting away a guiltless wife or husband. That's what putting away is. It's not, I'm thinking I'm married to my cousin. I don't think Father Dave Nix thought that consanguinity was the exception clause when he made this video right here 2 years ago or 3 years ago. I don't think he even thought that. I don't know where he's getting this. It's just weird.
Also because that line, he committeth adultery, that is, he makes her commit adultery, as Christ explained in Matthew chapter 5, verse 32. Now this is really important. Therefore, he who puts away his wife, says Father Lapide, on account of fornication and marries another, does not indeed commit adultery by divorcing the adulteress, but does so by marrying another.
Right there, he just, again, contradicts his new January article, which says, fornication is not adultery. Fornication is consanguinity. You married your cousin. But he just said, let's just repeat it. Listen.
He who puts away his wife, says Father Lapide, on account of fornication and marries another, does not indeed commit adultery by divorcing the adulteress, but does so by marrying another.
Okay, so he's saying if you put away your guilty spouse, your adulterous spouse, that's cool because that's the exception per Matthew 19:9. If they commit adultery, you can put them away, but you can never divorce them ever for any. There's no divorce. There's only putting away. It's called separation with the bond remaining. All marriages end at death. So, like he said, if you put away a guilty spouse, there's places for that with the bishop's permission to make sure everything's by divine law, but you can't go get remarried because you're still married to the other person. My point is that like I said, this exception clause is adultery. It's not consanguinity. It defies logic and history, as I said. Let's keep going.
So what Father Lapide is taking from Christ and the Church Fathers is the leaving the wife part. If she was unfaithful, you're not committing adultery by leaving her.
The leaving the wife part. If she was unfaithful, you're not committing adultery by leaving her. If she was unfaithful, okay? Not if she was your cousin. Right? Hello? That's all the exception clause is. But if they're not unfaithful and you leave, you're committing adultery just by separating. That's it. And Father Nix got that right here. And he's the one who taught me this. I was like, holy cow, this is so cool. I don't know what Father Nix is doing these days, man, where he gets this new article that it's consanguinity. That's just, it's trying to goof the Bible up enough to make it fit the modern practice. That's what Protestants do. Okay, hold on.
You're committing adultery by marrying another. Now, we just heard it's a little bit different if your spouse, this goes either way, man or woman, if your spouse was innocent, you just want to leave, then you do commit adultery.
If your spouse is innocent and you want to leave, you do commit adultery. That's it. Correct. That's the exception clause. You can only leave for reasons of adultery. You cannot leave ever if there's no reason. You can't do it because of the rights in the contract. But if you say the exception clause is for marrying your cousin, there are no rights to the contract because there ain't no... You can separate if you think they're invalid. So there's no rights. That's exactly what the tribunals are saying now. There's no rights, and and that's plays into, if there's no rights, then marriage can be defined rightless, and it can be defined any way you want. Therefore, you can do the annulment for any reason. That's all it is. So he's like I say, he's trying to take a more conservative tack on trying to clamp down on the annulments, but he's enabling them because he's trying to go with the status quo too much, or he's trying to go with the status quo because he's a theology of the body guy and he's an NFP guy. And so you have to get rid of your marriage rights to do that. Oh, brother, here we go.
Just by leaving. But if there was unfaithfulness, this explains this, the one exception we heard in Matthew 19:9.
Right there. Woohoo! Exactly. If there was unfaithfulness, this explains the one exception we heard in Matthew 19:9. Father Nix just said, as I said, I'm just trying to make this super obvious because it can get confusing, all right? Like he just said in his new article, the exception clause in Matthew 19:9 is cousin marriage. He says it right here. He gets it right. He gets it normal because he's quoting a Lapide who's quoting the saints, the church fathers. Let's kind of go back and hear that. Sorry, I'm getting a little too turned on here. Just a minute.
There was unfaithfulness. This explains this, the one exception we heard in Matthew 19:9. Again, let me read you Father Lapide. Therefore, he who puts away his wife on account of fornication, and this would be the other direction to women and men. Therefore, he who puts away his wife on account of fornication and marries another does not commit adultery by divorcing the adulteress, but does commit adultery by marrying another. I say too, Christ here concedes divorce to a man on account of the fornication of his wife. That
Christ concedes, what did he say? Sorry, I should listen a little bit more, sorry.
By marrying another. I say too, Christ here concedes divorce to a man on account of the fornication of his wife, that is in reference to the bed, but not the dissolution of the marriage, such that he would be allowed to marry another.
So it's Christ in Matthew 19:9 who is saying you can quote-unquote divorce, aka put away, for causes of infidelity, not for causes of, hey, that's my cousin.
That is in reference to the bed, but not the dissolution of the marriage, such that he would be allowed to marry another. Christ therefore replies to both questions.
Both questions,
and
like I said,
as it seems, by means of two propositions. One, whosoever shall put away his wife except...
Oh, come on. Oh, crud. I'm sorry. Let me get rid of this thing. Just a minute. Crazy, man. All right, here we go.
This would be the other direction to women and men. Therefore, he who puts away his wife on account of fornication and marries another does not commit adultery by divorcing the adulteress, but does commit adultery by marrying another. I say too, Christ here concedes divorce to a man on account of the fornication of his wife. That is in reference to the bed, but no.
On account of fornication of his wife. So he's saying that Jesus is saying the exception clause is if the wife fornicates, aka commits adultery, and you get to separate from the bed, but never the bond. Therefore, he refutes himself again from his new January article, which he says the exception clause is if you're married to your cousin. Therefore, you would be excused from the bed, of course, and board, as well as from the bond because it's your cousin. Duh. Doesn't it's just wrong. Okay, here we go.
Not the dissolution of the marriage, such that he would be allowed to marry another.
But I thought it was your cousin who he married per the exception clause. So why can't he remarry if he was married to his cousin in violating consanguinity?
Christ therefore replies to both questions, and as it seems, by means of two propositions.
So that's just an interesting thing. It needs to be redoubled, I guess. When the Pharisee says, who can divorce, they ask. It's their effect asking two questions, and Christ answers by giving two answers. If you divorce and get married to somebody else, that's adultery. But he's answering both questions. Just divorcing itself is adultery. That's why everyone used to think divorce was a sin, and that's why you could only separate with the bishop's permission. Once you get rid of that, once you redefine the exception clause to mean invalidity, everything's out the window. Marriage has no law. Divorce loses its stigma, of course. Then you can get annulled for any reason because there are no rights, because there is no contract, because you can just separate if you think the marriage is invalid. So there ain't nothing there to the marriage. The marriage is like hollow. There's nothing there. There's just there's love in the ether there somewhere. That's what the wedlock. This little wedlock right here. We're gonna put this lock. We're gonna lock it onto love. See that? There's nothing there. Where's the love? It's not there. You got to lock it onto something, piece of steel, a contract that you can define. A lock floating in air, a wedlock of love is zero.
1, whosoever shall put away his wife except for fornication commits adultery. And 2, whosoever shall marry another commits adultery. For together with the bill of divorce he abolishes polygamy, or having more than one wife at once, which had hitherto been allowed.
Yeah, hardness
the
of
same
heart.
thing
That's
is
right.
proved too by what proceeds when Christ proved absolutely from the very nature and original institution of matrimony, which fornication does not annul, that matrimony is altogether indissoluble.
Which fornication does not annul. Okay? Because all the Protestants will say, when your wife cheats, your spouse cheats, it's over. There's no more marriage. Wrong. So, and Father Nix correctly points out by quoting Elapide, who's talking with the fathers there, adultery does not end the marriage, obviously, but it's the exception clause you can separate. But if the exception clause is consanguinity, so that porneia means consanguinity, then that means that it does end the marriage because it's just your cousin. Okay, so if invalidity ends the marriage, and you can separate because of invalidity, then marriage has no rights. Like I said, I'm repeating myself. I'm just thinking this through. Therefore, one can get an annulment for any reason, which is exactly what's going on today.
Let me read that again. The same thing is proved too by what precedes when Christ proved absolutely from the very nature and original institution of matrimony, which fornication does not annul, that matrimony is altogether indissoluble. And then Saint Jerome, Saint John Chrysostom, and Saint Bede, and Saint Innocent, and Pope Innocent, Saint Augustine, and Pope Innocent I severely reproach certain bishops of their time for conceding with Tertullian second marriages to wives on account of the adultery of their husbands, saying that it is lawful for the innocent spouse to put away an adulterous partner and to marry another.
So he's saying Tertullian, who turned out to be a weirdo in the end, I think, and there's other heretic bishops and weirdos. He's saying that if you can separate, put away your guilty spouse and remarry. No, you can't. But if the exception clause is no cousin marriage, and it's invalid, then you can put away your cousin and remarry. So that's why I say his whole exception clause is consanguinity. It's illogical, ahistorical, holds no water, which is why I don't think Father Nix will want to discuss it. He's just saying his stuff. But everyone likes Father Nix. He's the man. Who are you to question Father Nix? Okay. There's something really wrong here. I don't know where this guy, I don't know what he's thinking.
So again, that was a list of saints that are very much against that opinion. Why against?
They're
why
against
they
your
against that
opinion, man,
Because
right now.
that's exactly what Christ stood up to against the Pharisees and all of their silly loopholes on marriage. So Christ is very serious about the indissolubility of marriage. And this is why, even though there are some exceptions, the magisterium, guided by the Holy Ghost, has allowed for the next 1,000 years of Christianity. This is why I would just summarize this, and I do have this in the show notes. Christ.
Yeah, there's exceptions, meaning other hard things. You know, the church has kind of outlined, okay, because adultery is an umbrella term for everything against marriage. If you, as I like to say, if you communicate with a 9-iron a lot, or you're doing other crazy stuff against religion, they can separate. Now he's going to quote what he says, and so maybe I'll scroll down and see if I can kind of see what he says.
Asserted to the apostles who would spread Catholic marriage, and also to the Pharisees looking for loopholes on remarriage, that in certain circumstances, a married person could carefully discern departure from one spouse when the other was provably guilty of unfaithfulness.
In certain circumstances, a married person could carefully discern departure from one spouse when the other was provably guilty of unfaithfulness.
And the early church added.
Okay, there's a mouthful right there. So, a person could carefully discern departure from one spouse. Yeah, but if you're going to discern departure, you can't do it on your own. You must go to the bishop, because per divine law, it's got to be. So, like I said, I think Father Nix knows a couple damsels in distress who have sort of carefully discerned their own departure. This is like, I've carefully discerned. I'm Mormon, and I carefully discerned my own abortion. You can't. This stuff is out. You have to go with divine law, and because marriage is public, the public authority is the bishop. He carefully departed from one spouse when the other was provably guilty of unfaithfulness. Okay, who's going to prove it? Where's the proof? Where's the courtroom? The answer is Canon 1152. You got to take your case to the church to make it public. You can't just say, my spouse committed adultery and I can prove it, therefore I get to separate. You can do that for a little while, but within 6 months you must bring the case to church for public approval. They investigate the case. Otherwise, you're the abandoner because you have bailed on an innocent spouse publicly, because you're guilty until proven innocent. Sorry, here we go.
The physical and psychological safety or salvation of this, then you may discern departure from your spouse, but you still can't remarry.
You may discern departure from your spouse, not on your own authority. And if you do have to depart because the house is like literally on fire, or you can't wait for the bishop's trial, you have to pursue due process after you escape the fire. All right, that's all that is. But I don't think he wants to go there. Because it's divine law that you have to go to the bishop, because Matthew 19:9, you can only separate because of adultery, and that's a public change in the contract, so the public authority must ratify it. That's the bishop. But I don't think Father Nix believes that. I've asked him point blank on Facebook like 9 different ways, and he kind of just like doesn't go there, won't answer.
But then the reason I would encourage you to read the book Primal Law.
All right, so he just talks about Law and Primal Laws, and that's cool. All right, so here, let's go to the next video. Where is it? And then we're almost done. It's going to be fun, kids. Hang on. Share this tab instead. All right. Let's listen to this. I'm gonna do default full screen. Okay, here we go. We're going to, let's see, hopefully we're in the right spot.
Myself, I guess. In our best guess, you never actually had the interior freedom to form an Elmer's glue bond at the altar, so God did not show up with super glue.
He's talking about annulments. He says you did not have the interior freedom to consent. And there's a bunch of annulments where you don't have the interior freedom. This is because Father Nix either doesn't know or won't admit what the object of consent. It's the right of the body for acts. Finite and defined. Excuse me. But if you need more than that, if marriage is a ton of other rights undefined, then you may not be able to discern what all those are. You know what I mean? That's why he says that.
But I said usually because there are...
All right, so hold on. Let's go to the next part. We're going to talk about cheating. It's minute mark 13:49. 13, right? It's close enough. Here we go.
...of you because of a pre-existing lack of freedom to make an active consent of will at the altar. Or another example would be a man addicted to cocaine.
Oh, wait. It's 10:39. I messed up. Excuse me. 10:30. Hang on. Let me push pause and figure this out. Okay, here we go. He's going to talk about your capacity for marriage if you're kind of into cheating and stuff. Oh, no. I think I messed it up again.
He just stayed silent, and even that
okay, here we go.
Got his head locked off.
Here we go.
Annulment's a valid process in the Catholic Church. So let's say a Catholic man marries a woman, and she was cheating on him during their engagement and even in the honeymoon. I've heard of these things. This is evidence of a pre-existing lack of understanding of fidelity.
Wrong. He understands fidelity perfectly fine. He's just not doing it, okay? So let's say you are engaged to someone to be married and you are unfaithful, but you're engaged to them for 19 years and then you get married. So you were unfaithful for the first 2 days of your courtship together, which lasted 19 years, and then you got married 19 years later. Is that an invalid marriage? No. It doesn't matter how much infidelity is going on. It just matters if you consent to permanence and consent to exclusivity. And you know what those words mean. Even if you plan to be unfaithful and plan to divorce if you don't like it, the marriage is still valid unless you can prove that that was in fact the case. But in other words, if you say the words, it is what it is. So if you're contracepting and you're shacking up, you can get married validly, okay, in the church. I don't know how much grace is going to get involved, but see what I'm saying? If you are committing, if you're cheating on your fiance the night before the wedding, it's still plenty valid because you know what it is. You're just deciding to sin, okay? But you only, like I said, you don't have to be capable of not cheating because everyone's capable of it. It's like you just have to say, I'm not doing that, and the marriage is valid. Otherwise, everyone's got some sort of propensity to some kind of sin, therefore no one can consent.
And in this case, the bond can be declared null because either the man or the woman or both did not have the freedom to make a lifelong commitment on the day of their supposed wedding.
They had the freedom. They did because they opened their mouth and they said, permanence, exclusivity, and children. Yes, I do. Okay. They said it. They knew what it meant. They said it. Okay. Whether they were, how good they were going to be about it doesn't have anything to do with it. You don't need capacity for fidelity or exclusivity. You don't need the capacity. You just need to know what it is and say yes to it. That's it. I commit to it. That's it.
The church guesses retroactively they didn't mean what they say.
The church guesses retroactively they didn't mean what they say. You have to have some proof. You can't just go, oh, yeah, when I got married, I really didn't intend exclusivity. Okay, that's nice, but you said it. Therefore, the marriage is valid. Now, if you have all your friends from back then, they all swore on the Bible and stuff that says, no, she said she's going to cheat on this guy within the first week of marriage and she plans on doing that, then I guess you could say, yeah, she actually didn't intend it because we have proof.
Because they didn't mean what they say, God never showed up with the super glue.
God shows up with the sacrament if you say it. That's all it takes. You just have to say the words and it's done. Kind of like the consecration. If the priest is, even if the priest is in mortal sin, he can consecrate the host, And so, oh, brother. Is that it?
So the church basically says, in our best guess, there was no glue between the two of you because of a pre-existing lack of freedom to make an active consent of will at the altar.
A pre-existing lack of capacity to to consent? Well, no. You just, like I said, you don't. I should replay that little bit of wordsmithing there. Let's see what it was. Hang on.
Of you because of a pre-existing lack of freedom to make an active consent of will.
Lack of freedom to make a consent of the will. You were free, okay? Whatever.
At the altar. Or another example would be a man addicted.
All right, it's okay. Then he goes into like drug addiction and stuff. Whatever. Okay, let's go to minute mark 2026. Hang on, where are we? Blah, blah, blah. We're almost done here. 2026. Oh, it's midnight. How about that? 2026. Hang on. Right there. Okay, here we go. Oh, shoot. Hang on. Okay, hit it.
I do admit the possibility that people really have had so much bad formation from priests and have come from such bad families of origin with so much abuse that no one is actually forming bonds at the altar. And I don't...
Oh, boy. That's what Father... Father... oh, come on, John. The exorcist priest. Father Ripperger says the same thing. There's a bunch of people who are from poor catechesis can't consent to marriage. Total excuse, total baloney. I think they do this because... You have to come up with a reason. Why are there all these annulments? There's so many annulments because they changed the object of consent because of NFP. Okay? And none of them can admit that because they're all sold on NFP. So they have to come up with some reason why are there all these annulments. And they're trying to say, maybe the people they don't know. They're not capable of permanence. Oh, or just something stupid. Anyway, here.
Don't say that sarcastically. These are very hard days. For this reason, I do believe that for many declarations of nullity, God himself may have never seen the bond formed in his great eternity looking down at the altar.
Yeah, it's just wrong. Like Father Nix said earlier in one of his videos, he said he's pretty sure the information is correct. At the turn of the 20th century, there were 4 annulments worldwide, and the church was like, whoa, we got to stop that. We don't want any annulments. 4 annulments, okay? It's not that... And think about this. What about during the French Revolution or right after when St. John Vianney rolls into town where all the marriages invalid because you had a bunch of crazy Frenchmen hanging out at the bar all the time? It's like, no. They were all valid because everyone knew it was for procreation, so you're married, okay? It's not that it's a poor catechesis. Otherwise, there'd be times in history when there's poor catechesis and there's invalid marriages everywhere. We've changed marriage to accommodate NFP. That is the entire reason there's an annulment explosion. Because there's no more objective definition to what you're consenting to.
So don't go doubting too much if you have received an annulment.
All right. Oh, wait. Yes. He says, don't go doubting too much if you've ever received an annulment. Yeah, you should doubt because, like you said, if it's ordinary process annulment, you know, not a lack of form, but kind of like, was my consent right? 99.6 of them are 0.6% are granted, is what he's saying. So I would doubt your annulment totally. If you listen, the rule of thumb is if you had kids or you were able to do the conjugal act and you knew that babies didn't come from a stork, it's valid. You had consent, okay? You had capacity to consent. You don't need capacity for anything else. Okay, so just hang on. So that's a wrap, my friends. I can't wait for you to slam me up and down in the comments section. You know, even old-timers like Hank Williams knew that it's just cheating that matters as far as what can separate you, not consanguinity. I think he knew it.
Your cheating heart will make you weak. You'll cry and cry and try to sleep, but sleep won't come the whole night through. Your cheating heart's gonna tell on you when tears come